Welcome back to Marked Manhwa, where Adrian's latest investment is finally himself. And yes, the system issued terms and conditions for having better posture. Julian brings a polished acquisition model. Adrian brings one question that can erase its profit. And the overlooked heiress has the receipt. Apparently, personal growth now arrived with a balance sheet. Adrian had learned not to buy even supernatural products without reading the terms. Magic declined to commit identity fraud on his behalf. He had spent his first life surrounded by expensive faces and catastrophically cheap judgment. Persuasion without discipline was merely a better-dressed tantrum. For once, vanity arrived after governance and arithmetic. Even miracles respected recovery time better than Adrian once had. The headache came with unusually useful footnotes. His spine finally resigned from years of inherited defeat. The system offered godlike power and still assigned basic self-care. He trusted evidence most when the evidence could embarrass him later. Paranoia becomes responsibility when one actually books the appointment. The body remembered every party even after society forgot the photographs. Being recognizable was suddenly a compliment. Luxury medicine had once tried everything except bedtime. The least glamorous answer was usually the one charging no commission. Adrian had already spent one life trying to become whatever the room demanded. For the first time, becoming better did not require becoming someone else. The suits had remained loyal to a worse posture. Old money often announced itself because substance had missed the appointment. A centimeter of cloth removed several years of apology. Restraint was cheaper, which offended nearly every lesson of his childhood. The face had merely stopped carrying every surrender at once. Looking legitimate began with refusing to make the company buy the mirror. She recovered from surprise quickly enough to invoice it. Self-deprecation suited him better now that it was not self-hatred. A lawyer's affection often resembled hostile due diligence. This was presented as medical evidence because for Adrian it was. Confidence became noticeable only after desperation stopped shouting over it. His new charisma survived its first encounter with embarrassment. Trust at Axiom occasionally wore the clothing of an examination. Intelligence did not provide answers, it shortened the walk toward them. Miracles remained refreshingly capable of receiving corrections. His old self treated correction as mutiny. This one treated it as data. Better thinking was proving expensive in useful ways. Her approval arrived disguised as a warning label. The title entered the office several seconds before the woman. A modest desk had just committed a serious offense against inherited status. Attraction annoyed her most when it complicated contempt. Family had always been the preferred password for bypassing boundaries. The sentence was polite enough to make the demotion unmistakable. A paper badge accomplished what 3 generations of manners had not. Jealousy preferred vague accusations because evidence was terribly limiting. Competence rarely needed to raise its voice. Celeste could imagine influence more easily than independent growth. The defense landed before Celeste could turn a woman into an accessory. A calendar entry became a small weapon in capable hands. Hierarchy shifted most cleanly when nobody argued about it. Her dressing room had never produced audited revenue. Square footage became less impressive when asked to reconcile. She weaponized his history because the present had stopped cooperating. Accountability denied Celeste the easier fight about denial. People secure in their work do not audition for a rival's respect. Control looked like conspiracy when it stopped belonging to her. The paper contained no romance, which made it difficult to sneer at professionally. An engagement ring had finally encountered a corporate firewall. Inheritance culture loved future claims and disliked present consent. The old Adrian would have offered the company merely to delay abandonment. Courtesy became devastating when paired with an access policy. When personal authority failed, she escalated to the family server. The patriarch scheduled assessments the way other families scheduled dessert. Accuracy sounded deeply unfair in her retelling. He cared less about Celeste's injury than the number behind it. Policies feel personal to people accustomed to exceptions. The menu was apparently seasoned with an oral examination. He had not reached dinner and was already budgeting for casualties. Dinner research was easier when billionaires announced their traps through filings. Her emphasis made the boundary comfortably explicit. Future memory remained useful and impossible to cite. Independent judgment was the only safe bridge between memory and evidence. The future did not become obvious merely because Adrian remembered it. Restraint was strategy with better table manners. The youngest daughter was permitted to prepare information, provided nobody noticed her understanding it. Clean often meant free of anything capable of disagreeing. The deadline sat quietly beneath several pages of triumphant projections. Decorative daughters apparently continued reading after the title page. In that house, adulthood was a management title granted by insecure men. Quiet preparation is often mistaken for obedience right until it produces evidence. Victor greeted improvement as though conducting an acquisition audit. It was difficult to romanticize irresponsibility after other people depended on the clock. Attraction entered the room and immediately requested hostile counsel. Celeste disliked answers that left no woman available to blame. The joke had aged poorly because its target had not. One sentence carried more professional courtesy than the rest of the foyer. 3 categories summarize most fortunes at the table. Truth sounded stranger than a convenient lie and survived longer. Governance appeared weak to men whose subordinates were paid to agree. The sentence made Victor look at him more carefully than the suit had. She kept searching for scandal because fiduciary duty lacked emotional handles. Several people at the table experienced this as radical philosophy. The first slide contained the confidence normally reserved for facts. Historical bans are very comforting immediately before regulators redraw them. This was not conversation. It was a knife wearing a napkin. The concise answer removed Julian's preferred opportunity for ridicule. The past is exceptionally reliable when nobody changes the rules. Recognition passed between them without requiring conspiracy. A question can be more dangerous than an accusation because it requires an answer. Technically correct was preparing to become financially expensive. He could not disclose tomorrow, so he requested a responsible version of today. Interest entered his voice the moment the argument acquired a denominator. Confidence volunteered a number that evidence had not approved. The decorative daughter had brought arithmetic to a hierarchy contest. Evidence moved across the table with excellent posture. A profitable deal had become a very expensive method of standing still. Possibility was now doing emergency work for certainty. He did not need to prove the future when risk allocation could survive either outcome. The missing appendix had apparently invited friends. Julian's victory dinner had become an emergency committee meeting. When numbers fail, motive becomes the traditional substitute. Arithmetic remained disappointingly immune to family politics. He could imagine betrayal more easily than public reading. The secret source was a website, Julian's most elusive adversary. Her calm answer removed the last convenient conspiracy. The patriarch's interest had completed its transition into displeasure. The word streamlined had begun an ambitious career in liability management. His voice stayed quiet because volume was unnecessary at that altitude. Nobody had expected Bella to expect anything professionally. Competence is often renamed clerical work when it arrives from the wrong sibling. One word granted space that the family had withheld for years. The table learned that silence and ignorance were not synonyms. Respect from Victor arrived only after a candidate survived attempted demolition. He answered as an operator rather than a son seeking applause. Praise remained too vulnerable, so Victor filed it as observation. The room contained several people who had volunteered as faculty. She preferred borrowed competence to a fiancé beyond her calibration. Celeste's attack accidentally became Axiom's endorsement. An invitation from Victor was simply a test with upgraded stationery. He refused borrowed power even when it arrived wearing respect. Billionaires often demanded brevity after creating decades of drama. Projection remained his most consistent forecasting method. Credit traveled to the person who had actually earned it. Recognition made her cautious before it made her pleased. Family peace apparently required incorrect banking assumptions. Revenge would have demanded spectacle. Governance preferred corrected terms. Accuracy became favoritism when applied to the overlooked sibling. The radical doctrine of naming contributors had reached Laurent house. People rarely announce another man's harmlessness with clenched fists. Calm made the threat Julian imagined considerably louder. Boundaries were clearest when stated before suspicion arrived. Being useful had taught her to expect extraction. Gratitude sounded unfamiliar without an invoice hidden beneath it. Invisible labor becomes visible immediately when it stops. The truth made Bella more uncomfortable than flattery would have. For once, attention did not arrive demanding access in return. Memory returned through a sentence he had once deleted unread. His past contained kindnesses he had mistaken for background noise. The question drained the caution from her face and replaced it with alarm. The original Adrian had been too offended by advice to notice rescue. An apology without explanation left the responsibility in the proper century. Regression was difficult to discuss without sounding either insane or criminal. He could offer her the dignity of being heard, even if years late. The family disgrace had also been designed as a liability container. Bella understood reputational warfare before Adrian knew he was in one. Regret becomes precise when it acquires an email subject line. In Laurent house, preventing fraud could apparently violate family loyalty. Protection needed rules, or it risked becoming another form of ownership. Ease was often labor performed so well that nobody saw it. No one had phrased interest as a professional question before. Her answer arrived too quickly to be newly invented. Visibility would not cure the family, but it could outlive their descriptions. Patriarchs enjoyed talent most when it increased property value. An opportunity became cleaner when it did not require changing owners. Concern arrived in the familiar uniform of command. Accuracy sharpened beautifully after years of being decorative. The accusation contained history, which made its misuse harder to dismiss. Specific facts proved inconvenient to inherited narratives. Threats sound maternal when families practice them long enough. The younger sister found a boundary and discovered it fit. She translated professional recognition into the only competition she understood. The sentence disappointed every melodrama Celeste had prepared. For once, the warning deserved to exist even if the target was wrong. Accountability denied Celeste both absolution and monopoly. Autonomy entered the hallway without requesting a family vote. Protection became credible when it also protected her from being displayed. Cosmic Judgment had reviewed one properly credited footnote. Decency now produced loyalty rewards, an unsettling indictment of Adrian's baseline. He was beginning to negotiate with morality's customer service window. Even magic understood consent more clearly than both families. The interface had waited across 2 lifetimes to deliver that insult. Growth became convincing only after it survived being laughed at. Adrian leaves one family dinner standing taller. Then Sarah finds the next Vale attack. His old club debt has been purchased, bundled, and scheduled to detonate before breakfast. If you want to watch Adrian turn that debt trap backward, like, comment, subscribe to Marked Manhwa, and keep the playlist rolling.